Hello everyone. Going to do a lab activity, just kind of like how we would do in the classroom. So I'm going to recommend that you have this in front of you so that you can go through it with me. And we'll do some things together. And then I'll point out what you have to answer when, uh, when it's time to do so. Okay, but I'm not going to stop the video for that long. I'll ask you to do that and answer your questions and then come back to playing it, okay? So we're going to take a look at how gel electrophoresis works. This is two peas in a pod, a case study of questionable paternity. So a little background, a couple had been trying for 6 years to have a baby naturally. When they had given up hope, they turned to one of the best known fertility clinics in the United States. They never imagined what would develop 9 months later. The couple studied their options and eventually opted for in vitro fertilization to increase their opportunities of having children. Technicians at the prestigious clinic extracted several mature eggs from Hannah's ovaries after several weeks of mild hormone treatments. Two of Hannah's ova, those are eggs, were selected and later fertilized with sperm from her husband. The fertilized eggs were then transplanted back into Hannah's uterus to continue their development. The in vitro IVF occurred in March, and the following December, the couple excitedly awaited the birth of twins. Hannah and Nathan Jones were ecstatic when healthy twin baby boys, Thomas and Daryl, were born. The differences in the Joneses twins weren't that noticeable at birth, but as the weeks passed and both infants started to grow, the parents watched in amazement as their children changed right before their eyes. One mellowed to a golden bronze, and his dark hair turned curly, while the other displayed a milky complexion with straight blonde hair. Right after the birth, it wasn't obvious to us, said Hannah, adding, Daryl was a little darker, but after 8 weeks I thought, this isn't possible. Daryl's skin had become quite dark, and he had a much flatter nose than his brother. Okay, so what you're going to do is pause the video right here. You're going to stop and think. Write down as many questions as you can that are raised by this story. Think of as many scenarios as you can that would lead to this situation and write them down here below. Pause the video now. Okay, the constant stares, innuendos, and inquiries from nosy neighbors became more than the new parents could stand. As hard as she tried, Hannah could not protect her family from the town gossip. We have lived in this town for a year now. When I walk with the kids, people stare at me and think, it's true, those kids really exist. People I never met look in the stroller and say, they are twins? How is that possible? After a lot of debate, Hannah, 33, and Nathan, 40, decided to have their family genetically tested using gel electrophoresis, also called DNA profiling. Okay, so this is where we would actually, in class, practice loading the gels, and you would load them into each of the wells. Keep in mind that when this is set up in an actual gel electrophoresis chamber, it runs from a a negative pole to a positive pole on the bottom because DNA is negative, and then it will pull down the DNA fragments with the smaller ones getting further and further to the bottom. So any gel that's in here, it kind of looks like a firm jello, has pores in it, and those pores get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so as the electric current that's positive down here and negative up there pulls those fragments down, the larger fragments will get stuck at the top and the smaller fragments will go to the bottom. Okay, so here's Thomas, here's Daryl, mother, father. In the past, the gels would have run overnight, and then we would have taken a look at them the next day. All right, so when we come to analysis of results, you can't observe an actual gel, but you can answer this question right here. What does each band represent? Answer that here. And then we are going to observe a gel below. What conclusions regarding paternity can be drawn from the below gel results? Which scenarios are no longer likely now that you are given this evidence, okay? So here's the gel. All right, so we're going to picture this as a full gel, and you can see each of the bands here. When you read this, you go across to see where there's a match, right? So we can see that Thomas and Daryl and Hannah are a match for this particular band. Okay, this matches no one. I like to circle this, they match. Okay, that doesn't match anybody. Not quite a match, no match there, but Thomas matches Hannah, his mom. Thomas matches Nathan, the dad. Daryl, no. These three are a match. This is just Hannah's. Thomas, Hannah, the dad, and then here's Daryl. Okay, so when you read horizontally going down, you can find all of these matches, and you should be able to draw a conclusion about Daryl's data. So you're going to pause the video and come back up and answer the questions here. Okay. After technicians at the UMH fertility clinic saw the gels, they were quick to defend their procedures and further suggested that the results showed Mrs. Jones had committed adultery. I was offended by their claims, said Mrs. Jones strongly. I live in decency. Ensuing legal action resulted in the clinic running additional DNA profiles between Daryl and the selected male recipients from the clinic that are shown below. Okay. So here we've got Hannah the mom. We can see how this band matches Daryl, right? So we know that Daryl is certainly Hannah's son. We can go across and see those matches. There are quite a few of them. All right, so you're going to interpret this gel now to figure out which of these patients, 1, 2, or 3, is Daryl's actual father. All right, so what conclusions can be drawn from the above gel results? What is the only likely scenario explained by this evidence? So pause the video right here and answer this question. As it turned out, Daryl's father is an African-American man from Aruba who had been to the hospital with his wife on the same day as the Joneses for a similar procedure. But how could such a serious mistake take place? Hospital spokesperson Simone Lebre said, "We suspect that a technician broke the rule and used a pipette that was not clean." The doctors of the university hospital are now calling the event a deeply regrettable mistake. Administrators at the university hospital clinic admit that the eggs were accidentally inseminated with the sperm from the Caribbean man, along with the sperm of Nathan Jones. So number 4, how would you feel if this situation happened to you? How do you think Daryl's actual father feels? And then number 5, do you think the Joneses should receive compensation for this mistake? Why or why not? So pause the video here and answer both of these questions. All right, a little background information on gel electrophoresis. If you have a highlighter, that would be great. This is a good review of some of the things that we learned in the biotech video. Restriction enzymes are used to cut DNA at specific known sequences in order to isolate a particular gene. Then a procedure called PCR, polymerase chain reaction, is used to amplify the tiny section of DNA, that tiny fragment of DNA, make more copies of it. The technique used DNA polymerase, the same enzyme that cells use to replicate their DNA before they divide, to replicate over and over again a particular DNA region of interest. Actually, the enzyme for PCR is Taq polymerase, not DNA polymerase, so I do want to make that clear. Taq is a form of DNA polymerase. It just shows up in the Archaebacteria. All right, with many copies of a gene, it becomes easier to compare genes from different individuals and see if they are the same or different. DNA molecules that differ in length can be separated and analyzed by a process known as gel electrophoresis. This method uses an electric current to push DNA molecules through a gel-like substance called agarose. Small DNA molecules move through the gel faster than larger ones. Restriction enzymes were first identified in and isolated from bacteria that use them as a natural defense mechanism to cut up invading DNA from a virus. There are thousands of restriction enzymes, and each is named after the bacterium from which it was isolated. 3 major examples are EcoRI, HIND3, and BAM-HI. A restriction enzyme acts like molecular scissors, making cuts at the specific sequences of base pairs that it recognizes. If a specific restriction site occurs in more than one location on a DNA molecule, the enzyme will make a cut at each of those sites, resulting in multiple fragments of DNA. Therefore, if a given piece of linear DNA is cut with a restriction enzyme whose specific sequence is found at 5 different locations, then the result will be 6 fragments of different lengths. The fragments are called restriction fragment length polymorphisms, or RIFLEPs. You can calculate the size of these RIFLEPs. In general, DNA fragments migrate at rates inversely proportional to the log 10 of their molecular weight. Base pair length is substituted for molecular weight when determining the size of DNA fragments. Thus, the size and the base pair length of a DNA fragment can be calculated using the distance the fragment travels through the gel. To calculate the base pair length, a DNA standard composed of DNA fragments of a known base pair length is run on the same gel as the unknown fragments and is used to create a standard curve. The standard curve in this case is a straight line, as a straight line is created by graphing the distance each fragment traveled through the gel versus the log 10 of its base pair length, and we'll take a look at that standard curve. Okay, so whenever we run a gel, we always run a ladder, and that's the standard curve that we measure against. Okay, so what you're going to do, you're going to use this gel below, and you're going to measure the distance in centimeters that each fragment migrated from the original well, and then you're going to record that on the table on page 8. Okay, so here are the wells, and then what we do, you can use a ruler. Centimeters is helpful. Okay, so on your paper, you would take the 0 line, 0 centimeters, and you're start at the bottom of each of these wells. Okay, so if you use your ruler, you're going to measure from this mark to that one in centimeters. Okay, then you will go from this, measure to here. Then from here, measure down there, from here to that one, and I think you get the picture. Okay, so you're going to do that for each lane. Okay, so you will measure the distance of each of these fragments. If you do not have a ruler, you may use the ruler on your phone to do so. It should be able to measure just fine. There's an app for that. Okay, and that should work out well. If you have any other issues as far as a ruler, just let me know, send me an email, and I can actually send you a paper ruler to print, and you can cut that out and use that. Okay, so you're going to measure each of these. Right, here's our first lane there, and then on the next page is where you record. Okay, so the first lane is going to represent Thomas, Daryl, Hannah, Nathan. Right, and when you measure from here down to there, that first one, you are going to put the distance traveled right here in centimeters. Okay, and then from here to the second one, right there, that will go in the next box down. Okay, and so you're going to do that for all of them. You may not fill all the boxes. It depends on how small the fragments are. Okay, and so we could see the marker used. This is the ladder, so we know if we're going to compare the distance for our bands that are here, we can compare them to this marker. Okay, and the marker at 2.6 centimeters is roughly this length. Okay, so that's what we need the ladder for on this side. We will do the distance traveled first for each one. Okay, when it comes to the base pair length, we have to use the log graph for that. Okay, so you're going to fill in, once again, each lane. You're going to have a distance from the bottom of the well to the band, bottom of the well to the band. Fill those in for each person. And then we're going to use the graph here in order to, let me make it a little bit smaller so you can see what you have to do, in order to get the base pair length. Okay, so basically how we do this is we come to the bottom, and here's the migration distance in centimeters right here. Okay, so I'm just going to take a guess. Let's say for Thomas, the first measurement was 2.7 centimeters. Okay, you will come to the log graph, right, and we can look down on the bottom here, and this is 2, and this is 4, right? So 3 would roughly be in the center, right there. And then let's say we estimate we come back and 2.7 is somewhere around here. Okay. You take your ruler and you put it vertical at that spot. The ruler is going to come up. You follow the line up. Follow that up, right? And where it hits this, curve that we've drawn in there, you take the ruler and you go across, just like that. And then you would have your base pair length listed over here. That's how you do it. It's super easy. Okay, I'm going to make up another one. So let's say the next one down was, I'll just say, let's say it's 4, let's say it's, I don't know, 3.9 centimeters is what you measured. Okay, so for Thomas, you come down. Let's say this is our 3.9. Put your ruler vertical right here. Follow the vertical line of the ruler up. This is where it hits. Take the ruler and come across. 7,000 base pairs is the fragment length. That's all you have to do. Okay, so you will do that, the base pair lengths for Thomas, and then for Daryl, and then Hannah, and then there's Nathan. There's nothing for you to graph here. You don't have to draw anything on this. You are not plotting points. You're just using the standard curve to figure out the base pair length for each of the fragments in that gel sample. That is it. Okay, email me if you have any questions on that. All right, for the conclusion questions, you'll finish all of these. Okay, these are basic questions about electrophoresis. Okay, they're here. I think those are fairly standard and easy. And then we've got some practice questions for you. Okay, so for each of these, right, you're going to label each fragment. So you can see the fragment here is A, B, C, and D. All right, you're going to draw them in the gel as to how they would line up. Okay, for this one, when you get to the circular ones here, okay, below is a plasmid with restriction sites for BAM-HI and EGO-RI. Several restriction digests were done using these two enzymes, either alone or in combination. And you're going to use the figure to actually answer the questions, okay? So by determining the number and size of fragments produced with each enzyme, the KB stands for kilobases, or thousands of base pairs, which lane is going to show a digest for BAM-HI only. So you come over here, we can see that BAM cuts from here. Here's BAM, and it cuts to there, okay? So we look at where BAM cuts. BAM is going to make a cut from here. We ignore the EGO-RI, not interested. BAM, so that's 8 plus 4. Okay, so the first cut is going to be 12 kilobases. There's another cut at 2, and then there's another 6 base kilobase cut between these 3. You'll have 3 fragments. Go find them over here, and then fill in your answer. You will do the same thing for this question as well. Okay, and then determine which of the following statements are correct. All right, so that's how you do the P's in the Pod Lab. I hope that's helpful. Again, if you're confused by anything, please just shoot me a message in the Remind, or you can email me a question. And I hope that's helpful.